The world is a very big place. Everywhere, something is interacting with something else. At a systemic level, everything has an impact on everything. A system is simply defined as a group of parts that function as a whole. When you influence one part, you automatically affect all the other parts, and therefore the entire system. The system is made up of all of the parts, and those parts communicate with one another. When you affect the whole system, you affect each of the individual parts as well. Many of those parts consist of particles, which are tiny portions of matter, while other parts are composed of waves, which is how we observe light, electrical impulses, shadows, sounds, or even heat. In quantum physics, there's a theory called wave-particle duality. This theory states that all particles present have both wave and particle properties. The double slit experiment is a demonstration that explains how light and matter can display both wave and particle characteristics. The double slit experiment, which you can find on YouTube very easily, is a demonstration that explains how light and matter can display both wave and particle characteristics. So what they did was they shot an electron, a tiny bit of matter, toward the double slits and saw that the behavior exhibited not only wave properties, but that the electron would also split itself, go through both slits, and then reconnect. They also noticed that it would go through both slits and neither of the slits. Scientists were so baffled by these results that they decided to place a measuring device to understand more clearly what was happening. And as a result, they were completely shocked. The moment the electron was being measured or observed, it went back to behaving just like a regular, old, boring particle, which is to say the very act of observing the electron caused the electron to only go through one slit. That's fascinating. I strongly recommend that you find that YouTube video and that you watch it, the one on wave-particle duality, to get a far more in-depth understanding of this very incredibly brief example definition that I provided here. But why is this important? Our thoughts are exactly like the wave-particle duality theory in that they exhibit both properties of wave and particle. Initially, the thought is a wave, but the more we focus on it, which is really being the observer of that thought, then it suddenly becomes particle and manifests into our field of reality. We call this evidence. So, say you want a new car and a few months later you get a raise or a tax refund which enables you to buy this car. You would attribute this to a series of events, the actual evidence. But keep in mind, your new car, before you were actually driving it, was first simply a thought with a wave property. And the more you kept your focus, the more you stayed as the observer of your thought, you were able to create the events to allow for you to have the evidence of your desires or experience. Okay, let's take this a step further. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle says the following: matter that exhibit wave-like properties aren't localized in space. If we were to use a work metaphor, is the office where you work HQ, headquarters? If yes, that would be, for you, the local office. Every other office around the world for you would be a remote office, a satellite office. Those offices would, in essence, be non-local, right? Einstein defined non-locality as, quote, spooky action at a distance. And that could certainly describe many remote offices, right? In Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, since the particle is exhibiting both properties of matter and light, you cannot tell both its position and momentum simultaneously. In fact, the more precise you are about measuring the position of the particle, let's say, the less precise you are about measuring the momentum, and vice versa. If you cannot determine precisely either the location or momentum when measuring a particle, then that would leave you with not one result, but many results, many outcomes, many options. If at a quantum level particles exhibit wave properties and waves exhibit particle properties, then our options for a particular outcome become ad infinitum. Vicki Anderson, the author of the blog The Awakening, explains the Heisenberg theory thusly. She says, quote, "His theory states that an observer influences the outcome of events simply by observing them. In other words, it is only if we expect to see a subatomic particle in a specific location that it will in fact exist there. Light becomes matter when it is observed." Though I believe she might be confusing the Heisenberg uncertainty principle with the observer effect, I'm not sure. The observer effect states that a system will be impacted simply by the act of observing it. Her last sentence, "light becomes matter when it's being observed," is the fundamental principle of the law of attraction. However, I believe all three concepts are important for creating the experience we want. So let's quickly review them. So we have wave-particle duality theory, which is at a quantum level. These particles exhibit both properties of light and matter. We have the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, where if you measure velocity or momentum of a particle, you'll not be able to determine the precise position of that particle, or vice versa. And the observer effect, the very act of measuring or observing something, alters the state of whatever is being measured. And all matter and light have a very important property. That property is called energy. There is a saying, energy goes where attention flows, and that can be verified with Newton's first law, cause and effect. An object's going along, let's say for instance a ball, it's rolling across a field because a soccer player kicked it. The ball rolling is the energy that is being exerted. The attention or focus could be described as its direction. Suddenly, another player intercepts its focus by kicking it in a different direction. Now there is new attention or direction and a fresh wave of energy. When we apply this metaphor to goal setting, succession planning, devising a marketing strategy, or building a business plan, all require attention and energy. As long as you're driven and keep your focus at a quantum level, you'll remember the wave-particle duality theory, and you'll know anything's possible. You'll activate Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which will give you limitless options beyond your imagination to create that particular possibility. And finally, by observing your surroundings and staying positive, you'll evoke the observer effect.